Okay, so you get to end with the cheerleader. I'm Jen Herrick. I'm the Elmira Downtown Development Executive Director. I've been there for 13 years. For the first 8, I felt like I was the only cheerleader on the squad. And back in 2015, the city of Elmira started working on their comprehensive plan. And then the DRI, another Hunger Games type of program, came to fruition. And Elmira was proud, we're very proud that we were the first community that was awarded with the Downtown Revitalization Initiative. If you look up on this slide, this is how it happens. It happens with partners. So in Betsey, Three Rivers, Arbor, sitting here, they've all been partners in making the DRI happen. So what did Elmira want? We wanted to establish a walkable urban center in downtown, but connecting our neighborhoods. We wanted it to be healthy and safe and sustainable. We wanted to develop complete streets. We wanted to strengthen our public spaces with our 2 public parks that we have in our downtown core. So in this past year, in the next 2 years, and if you haven't been to Elmira and you come to visit, you will witness orange cones, fencing, detour signs. A lot of our community members are exasperated, but we all see this as positive growth happening in our downtown. So here's a core of downtown, the past. You can see in the early 1940s, 1950s, Elmira was a mecca for shopping. We were a shopping district. The picture on the lower, that was the Izzard's building, starting to see a decline in the 70s. And then this is Elmira today, but we're on an upward of growth. So when we started talking about the DRI, we talked about that we needed to focus. We needed to have a focus target area. So this was the boundary that we decided to go with when we developed our plan. So within that, when we were awarded, we were been able to leverage over $30 million of public and private investments. What was the DRI going to do? It was going to be a catalyst for rehab of our historic stock. We lost a majority of our historic stock to urban renewal after the flood of 72. People are still talking about the flood of 72, but I tell everybody I was 3, so so do the math. But so I'm like, that is part of our history, but it's time to now, utilize Chemung River. To us is such an asset to the community now that we're going to put the flood of 72 and we're going to concentrate on the future. We needed our projects to be transformative, and we needed to make sure that we are attracting and retaining new residents and creating downtown as a vibrant community. So these were the top projects that were our priority list. We had a block of historic buildings that for 10 years prior to the DRI, we tried to redevelop. They were beautiful buildings, but they had witnessed, as many of our downtown core witnessed, blight and just neglect, probably 15, 20 years of neglect. So unfortunately, those buildings had to be raised, but what we did get is now we have, and you'll see in a slide ahead, is we have a mixed-use new build infill, and it's $4 million of DRI funding, but it was a $15 million project. We have a Lake Street Bridge, which has been closed to 2011. We have 5 bridges. Elmira has a population of 30. I think we have more bridges than Manhattan. I'm not sure, but we have 5 bridges. So we, instead of demolishing the bridge, we wanted to connect the north side to the river to the south side. So these projects are going to be happening in next year in 2020. We have a parking garage that back in the 70s was being utilized because we were also a shopping mecca, but it witnessed, again, blight, and people stopped using them. They didn't want to use in the parking lot, but we actually see it as an asset to what's going to be happening into all the redevelopment that we're going to be witnessing. We have a river, but we also have a river wall. And if you saw the river wall, you can't see the river. You're unable to see the river. So we're going to elevate a boardwalk so we can, you can have a view of this beautiful asset that we have in our district. We also are going to modernize our zoning. And so this all is $9.7 million, but there's so many other fundings that's going to be leveraged. We also did a housing study. If you know Elmira, because we had been in such a bad place for 40 years, what we heard was people will not live downtown. They're not going to live downtown. So we did a housing study as part of the DRI plan. And so you can see at this list, like we have 2 completely filled developments that have market rate apartments, and they have a waiting list to them. So the first one is up on our row houses. That was 16 market rates. That was 100% occupied before they even opened. 51 market rate. That's our new build down in the corner where the historic buildings were. But they really took, with their design, they really wanted to keep consistent with the fabric that we had left. And those are 100% with a waiting list. And who's living in these apartments? It's empty nesters, it's young professionals, it's physicians, it's hopefully students, residential, because we have a medical school that's going to be opening LECOM in July of 2020. And so we also have these other projects that are happening, and they're market rate and they're affordable housing, and that's a total of 161 apartments that we will be witnessing going online by 2020, 2021. So whoever said that people aren't going to live downtown, we're just proving them wrong, because there's been studies done and we have people that are interested in this living. So here's our new build. It's 51. I'm just going to go through these really quick because it shows all the projects that the DRI money has been contributed to. This was 51 market rate apartments. 75% of the commercial space has been filled. We have one space that we are waiting. We're hoping to get a restaurant, an anchor project in there. This was also leveraged with Restore New York money, which we actually received. If anybody's here, we received it in 2008. It took us about 10 years to use it. But we have commercial tenants, Labella, Wells Fargo, and a coffee shop is going in there. This is one of our anchor buildings, a historic building that was this is completely filled, 4 market rate apartments. This is right in our corner of Water Street and North Main Street. This is a project that is happening with 18 residentials, and this is going to go online in April of 2020. Here's another historic building. These, we also designated these as historic districts, so they'll be getting, also receiving historic tax credits, which make the properties and the projects more viable as well. This was also a Restore New York grant. Another block. This is part of the DRI. This is Arbor Housing Project is working on this. Betsey was actually instrumental in having an organization, Art Space, come in, and we did a study to see if we had a need for artist space, and that study, and Betsey, correct me if I'm wrong, it said that we could support 32 artist lofts. So this project is happening. This is one where you'll see fencing around it right now. We're really excited about this project because these properties have been vacant probably for 20 years. And so this is really, and it's right at the tip of our civic history. It's in our civic historic district, but it's where all of our county and city buildings are. So to watch this project come alive, it's just going to be a complete game changer. This is our pedestrian Lake Street Bridge, which connects the north side to the south side of Elmira. Instead of demolishing it, we're going to make it a pedestrian area. This is going to go under construction in 2020. Izzard's building. This was one of our department stores back, and it closed in the late 80s. This is a project pending on state funding, which we hope we will hear about in December through the CFA process. We applied for a $500,000 downtown anchor grant, and this would be 33 market rates with 5 commercial, and they're actually talking about putting a child care because of that need that Betsey talked about. The row houses I already talked. So here, this is a project because we not only feel that market rate is important, but we do feel affordable housing is equally important because they are part of our, our fabric of our downtown. So this project actually started prior to the comprehensive plan and the DRI, and this is through Housing Visions, and this is going to have 45 affordable. What you can't see here is that behind here they actually built 5 new houses, and those houses are completed and they're being rented. This project is near completion, but this will have 45 rental units in it. This is not in the downtown district, but it's about 3 blocks away. This was what was known as Jones Court, and this was empty for 20 years. And then our former community development director was instrumental in bringing Limited into it. And now if you could see driving down the street and seeing the lights on, this is going to have 94 units of affordable housing, senior and veteran care in it. LECOM, we're very excited about this. We're getting a medical school, this construction, that is probably where they are. I think this is the most recent picture I have. The first class opens for 2020. This is new construction. It's going to have, by the time they get full roster, it's going to have 480 students, 46 plus faculty, and the economic benefit for our community is going to be 60 million with going up to 78 million. So we're really excited. This was a long struggle of getting this, but we finally got it, and it's going to just be another game changer to our community. So our setbacks, we have 2 years to spend the DRI money. So what has happened with it is some of the projects have gone over budget, so we have to wait another season to do another budget. Property owner time restraints even on the smaller projects because they have to come up, it's a matching, so they have to come up with a matching fund. And then I'm sure all of you can relate to this, that, organizations like Elmira Downtown and other, they have a capacity, so it's actually being the administrator of these funds. As Betsey said, with the current trends that we're seeing is obviously downtown revitalization, workforce development, the housing, placemaking. The one thing about placemaking, through the DRI process, we had applied for branding. We want to brand our city as a new destination, but we didn't receive the funding, so we're working on that. We're going to be looking for other grant opportunities. And then business recruitment. We are no longer a shopping mecca, but I know that we can be something greater. We did focus groups through the DRI. We know what the community wants. So the next step as these commercial units come online is that we will put a strong business recruitment team together, and we will start filling our vacant space. These are future projects that I just wanted to put in. Our federal building, which is open, it has a tap house in it. The carriage house, which is going to have 6 market rate, and then our Izzards again. And actually, that's my new brand. That's Elmira Downtown Development's new brand that just came out. So it's all, the DRI has been, I keep on saying game changer. I think that word has been used a lot, is that we wouldn't be able to do any of this with what happened with the DRI. It really has been a catalyst for the city of Elmira, who, went through many years of blight, and I am excited and proud to be their number 1 cheerleader.
So a couple things. One of the things this morning, I think it was Helene who said in the beginning, there is this investment disparity, right? Especially I think at the Housing and Urban Development Department, where we put so many more resources into urban areas than we do into rural areas. And I think sort of that's inherent at HUD because I can't remember which administration it was. I've been there longer than Microsoft. You talked about learning it at City. I've been at HUD a little longer than that, I think. But I don't remember which one said, we're gonna put the urban back in HUD. We're gonna put urban development back on the table, which we, from the time I started in community development, the investment has dropped about 50%. So the communities that are getting HUD resources now, it is about 50% less just over the last couple of decades. So there's a lot less public investment to go around. And I think that concentration on urban areas is more critical, at least to our mission, based on some of the data that we heard this morning, right? There is an income disparity in urban areas versus suburban and rural areas. There is a less investment where it is needed in those areas. So I think keeping that path is important. Another reason to invite your federal funders and public officials to these discussions to ensure that dollars are going where they are needed. I think the other interesting thing that you all raised during your presentations is something that we often see challenging at the HUD level when we're looking at it from above, and that is often there are 2 sort of development tracks happening in a community. There's the economic development track that is very focused on investment and job creation, and the community development and housing track, which is very focused at the neighborhood level. And often those two don't meet. We don't see economic development folks having coffee with the affordable housing market especially, very often. And you have found ways to sort of make that happen in your communities. Can you talk a little bit about how that got started? Who was the first one at the table? What was the incentive? And how housing and economic development have merged?
Well, I think basically it was out of necessity. I did not want to get in the housing business. And in fact, when I was interviewed for the job, Three Rivers Development 4 years ago, the first question they asked is, how do you feel about housing? And I said, it's something that somebody else needs to be doing, that economic developers shouldn't be doing. And I learned early on they were not going to let me get away with that. And Jeff Eaton with Arbor Housing and Development was on our board. And I said, okay, let's try this. Let's do a pilot. It took us a year just to get consensus that the Economic Development Organization should be in the room with the Affordable Housing and Community Development Group. And so we got to that point. But it was tough to get there, but you have to do it, right? It's that leadership capacity, it's that decision. You've got to convene. So I would say in each of your communities, if you can find a community group that is an influential community group, and again, I have 37 board members, they're all business and industry leaders, Jeff Eaton, our IDA director, et cetera. Get those people in the room together and make sure they know we're all on the same team.
And because I'm try to tend to stay in my own lane, but when I feel that we should all get together, I kind of force myself on it, and I just tell them I want to be invited to the table. Really, I mean, because I think that affordable housing and what's happening in the downtown district and the neighborhoods, they have to happen together because every individual matters when it comes to rebuilding a city.
And then the other question that came to my mind, and we want you to get your questions out and discussion going as well, and that is sort of the economic development part of workforce development. So Betsey, especially you talked about recruiting talent and housing being, we don't have anywhere to put the talent when we get them. But what about pointing to Russell's presentation? We have areas not at the game, they're not at the table, jobs aren't coming to their community, and we have those folks living in affordable housing without job opportunities. How do we balance recruiting talent versus building talent and using our existing population to put skills in place? Where's the workforce development part?
So one of the things, I just recently hired a gentleman by the name of Fred Arcuri. He's the gentleman that's still paying Villanova till he's 50, and stole him from Mohawk Valley Edge just about 10 months ago. In any event, the first thing I asked him to do was look at labor participation rates. Because to your point, it's not always about bringing people in from other places. It's what's the labor participation rate of the people that are already there, right? And why aren't they working? So if you look at women, predominantly in that childbearing age, right? 25 to 30 something. The two things that keep women from going to work are transportation and childcare. So obviously they have to become priorities, right? Which I've already discussed that. The other thing that was shocking, our worst labor participation rate are white males aged 25 to 44 that aren't married. Now you would think, right, intuitively you would think that can't be, but that's the case. And so we are, and I can't answer the question why today, but we are doing a deep dive. So this is we're actually doing a deep dive to figure out why those people aren't gainfully employed. And it's not that they're not college educated, they're college educated. What we find is one of our better labor participation rates are those same age gentlemen, 25 to 44, with just a high school diploma, but they're married. Okay, so I'm not even going to go there on that whole social dynamic and what motivates men to go to work, particularly if they're 25 to 44. Besides their wife, maybe it's their mother, I don't know. So, but mom's at work, right? So there's a lot of things going on, but we're looking into that. So imagine as an economic development professional, I'm having one of my team members look at all this socioeconomics of why people aren't at work in my existing labor shed. And so as I get that information, I am more than happy to share that with any of you. And we'll probably be expanding that not just an R3 county area of Steuben, Schuyler, and Chemung. We'll probably take that study through the 8 counties of the southern tier.
I think for you Cornell researchers, we just identified a new study area on male employment between 25 and 44, married versus unmarried, right? One of the other observations coming from the HUD perspective is that when we go to communities, the number one topic they say they need when we say, well, how are you going to deploy your dollars and versus what are the needs in your community? The number one need almost every city says to us is economic development. And when we compare that to how dollars are invested, it is rare that communities are using large chunks of their federal funding, at least from HUD, for economic development. That is we have been told there's too many barriers to the use of the resources that way, that it is more often when we look, including in upstate New York, where the bulk of community development block grant dollars go, it is public works. So the biggest investment of folks, how you are using HUD dollars, is for water lines, sidewalks, parks, street reconstruction, that is been years of disinvestment or neglect to our public infrastructure and lack of enough local tax revenue to do it, and subsidizing what are designed to be community development anti-poverty dollars for infrastructure, so that we can keep fire hydrants working in neighborhoods and roads passable. And so I think in terms of the planning piece, it is so tempting to take limited federal dollars and invest them in maybe an easier use than a harder use that requires a lot more collaboration. And so I'm curious to hear from folks how economic revitalization, housing, and job creation is being funded outside of the public. Out in New York, I think we have the Hunger Games, as you have all referred to several times, so there's more resources. But it's not necessarily happening with HUD at the table, that economic development, or to a very limited extent, maybe a little bit of micro lending. And so, again, we're not funding Corning, certainly in a direct way. We are Elmira, but not much economic development. And I think that's true even for some of the larger communities that are here. So economic development, I think, in terms of economic revitalization, that is a little more holistic, is often really left, I think, to people cobbling together competitive state funds and local resources. So how can we do that better?
Tiramisu of financing. That's the tiramisu of financing, or the lasagna of financing. Either way, it's yes, exactly. But I think, to your point, don't underestimate the power of good infrastructure, because you really can't do anything else in economic development if people can't flush toilets and have clean water. So please accept the fact that there is an order of priority. And if you get to a community as an economic developer or even a community developer and they don't have, good water, good sewer, good streets, public safety, et cetera, it makes the job even harder. So I would say your dollars in are equally important, right? It's the whole matrix of it. It's getting everybody in the room. And I do appreciate the fact that we don't oftentimes have HUD in the room. I think we need to do that more. We need to have HCR and everybody, the Department of State, in the room more often.
Jill, I'm wondering if we can, yes.
So Robin has a microphone and is happy to get to you if you have some questions for our panelists. I saw a hand, yes. We'll start here and then we'll come back over to you.
Hi, I'm Margot Hittleman with the Natural Leaders Initiative here in Tompkins County. I would love to hear if you would talk about thoughts, attempts, aspirations, successes, or challenges in engaging the recipients of the folks you were looking at building the affordable housing for in the planning process. And I know that's not always simple, but I'd love to hear, what were the aspirations, where were the successes, where were the challenges? Was that part of the process?
So you mean recruiting them into the affordable housing, or engaging them? So with everything that the city of Elmira does, we have public meetings, we have everything is community engaged. So we go into the neighborhoods, we hear what their wants and their needs are. And that's especially with the Jones Court, which now we call Libertad, that there was a lot of neighborhood engagement of who should be, what needs are there. So that's how we got to the veteran needs and the senior living and the affordable. And in this building, there's going to be not only apartments, but there's going to be services that are going to be available. And Elmira was also the recipient of Empire State Poverty Reduction Initiative. And so we also, in 4 quadrants of the city of Elmira, we have these navigators that people can go to, and then they tell this navigator what their needs are. And then they go and they find, the answers to the problems that they have. Yes, we have the high poverty in our census tract 6, 10, and 6, 7, and 10, and those navigators are housed in there to help and support those individuals.
So I'm Katrina Korfmacher, University of Rochester, and my question kind of links together yours with all of your presentations. So last year, Governor Cuomo required all the economic regional development councils to come up with environmental justice plans or strategies. And when we were working on ours for Finger Lakes, we found a lot of challenges with data, even definitions, concepts, and metrics. And I wondered how you saw that layering into the work that you're doing, Betsey, and also if work like Russell's could help inform that in the future.
I don't know if I'm on. So yeah, the metrics that I was drawing on are largely publicly accessible and available. They're just in somewhat esoteric data sets. And so one of the things that we do, so my unit's with Hale with the ILR school is based in Buffalo, and it's called the Buffalo Co-Lab from the ILR school. And we share space with, I'll go plug to someone I believe at your table, Sam McGavin. We share space with a community think tank, a nonprofit think tank called the Partnership for the Public Good. Hello? Oh, wow, that's scary. You don't want to hear a monotone voice burst into song. And so with that unit in particular, we're trying to add capacity where we can tap into more of these data sets and then plug the information into that network that then gets filtered out to at present about 294 community partners that are doing similar work. And so that's very regional and very place-based and specific. There's not, as far as I understand, any sort of New York State agency that's plugging those sorts of data and analyses into the groups that are actually in position to do it, other than, again, our nonprofit network that exists in the city of Buffalo and in the region of Buffalo and Niagara. So I think that we have this inchoate model for maybe doing that and scaling up. However, right now we're very hyper-focused on the Buffalo-Niagara region.
I might add that HUD has a mandate for use of any of our dollars that includes a component of citizen participation. So every city that is doing a project from homeless shelters to economic development is supposed to engage the target audience. And there are cities that are really good at this and cities that aren't. And I think Niagara Falls is in the room. I want to give a shout out to Seth Picarillo. One of the things that they did was adopt a participatory budgeting model that actually said to the community, we are going to allocate this much money out of our annual budget for you to decide how to spend in your neighborhood. And they kind of reeled it in after the second year to focus on public spaces and placemaking, just because it was a little unwieldy to get every idea. But that idea, I think HUD has tried to encourage that in some ways. We've hosted a few technical assistance roundtables on it, but just how do you get stakeholders to have a role in deciding how resources are allocated in their neighborhood and make that legitimate? I think it's just not holding a public hearing, but actually involved in planning and placemaking and design. That's a challenge to the folks that have historically been able to control those resources. So that's a political, sort of small p political conversation, as well as a capacity issue. You have to have staff that can go out and facilitate that. and I hope that we can find ways to help more communities do that, at least with their public resources as a mandate, and hopefully as a mission.
Did you want me to answer that question as well on environmental justice? So I will be honest with you, the 8-county region of the Southern Tier, we have not developed our environmental justice strategy yet, but we do have projects that are coming in for URI money that are including environmental justice in their applications because it is required now. And that's everything from taking brownfield sites and, cleaning them up and making sure that, there's mixed use housing, not just affordable, but mixed use, mixed income. And also just access to things like community garden space and things like that. So, and some of them are actually blending economic and social justice together with environmental justice. So it's really kind of interesting to see what's happening with, especially with the governor's climate policy. So things are really, the applications for CFAs and URIs are all going to look different.
I just want to know a little bit about economic development and community development. So let's assume that you put up all these infrastructures in communities in order to make affordable living. And at the end of the day, the people there are well educated and the income base is not reflecting on their level of education. So they end up migrating to places they can get equal level of their education input. How would that be more beneficial? Because in this case, you will notice that the resources there is not going to have a full impact so far as this discussion is concerned. So if you can maybe explain a little bit more to me with regards to that aspect, or maybe you do more work in terms of income base, not low income base, but high income base with regards to education level and the resources to put at a particular place. Thank you.
So if I understand you correctly, you're talking about underemployment. So people that have maybe a college degree or a master's degree or PhD level, and they move into a community, say they're a dual career couple, partner, spouse. So one of the things that we're doing, and actually we may end up starting to partner with Cornell, is, and this is a challenge, I think, for all of the companies in the Southern Tier, whether it's Raymond Corporation in Greene, or it's Corning in Steuben County, or BAE, or CAF, or whoever, no matter where they are, they will land, the company itself will land a employee, or work on it, almost have them, but then they'll say, well, my spouse or my partner needs employment as well. And so we're working on the development of a dual career concierge program where we can actually have a rapid response where if a company has made an offer to an employee and they have a partner and the resume is ready to go and all that, that we can kind of blast it out to our key, to appropriate, right, wherever it's appropriate. And in fact, we just had a individual who was hired by Corning, whose spouse ended up finding a job here at Cornell, and then we had an individual who was hired by Guthrie Hospital, and physicians are really tough. This is a really tough place to land physicians. And then we had to place her spouse here at Cornell. So we're beginning to work together on that. I hope that answered your question. Again, the key thing there, here we go again, right, is getting all the right people in the room. You have to get, now you got to get HR directors in the room with economic developers, because the CEO doesn't know what they're hiring and things like that. So that this whole workforce development conversation is really evolving on how we do business, So great question though.
And I think there's also a whole other conference to be had around what new economic development is going to look like, right? So and this is where jobs are being created. I mean, we know that traditional manufacturing is out, but gig economy is in. So we have all these people who are creating their own jobs, and the creative economy is part of that. And we don't necessarily have the infrastructure in place of how we do that for economic development and how it fits into neighborhoods and co-working spaces. And I think that's where the next conversations we need to have in upstate New York. That some communities are starting. The Capital District has, I think, a lot going on there, but we don't, I think, out in West New York yet. So next phase of economic development. We'll put that on our agenda for next year's conference, maybe.
So Jill, do we have time for one quick question back here or comment?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
we do.
Hi, Louis is a graduate student in Cornell. So I'm working with Engaged Cornell on how can Cornell be more of an anchor institution within the county. And some of the questions, I mean, Cornell has traditionally been very strong in business development, bringing in sort of incubators, startups into the region, but not so strong in placemaking and some sort of workforce development and affordable housing, for example. So how can a university like Cornell University, in a place with such a strong town-gown sort of relationship, pivot into sort of place-making policies? So that's whether should we gather specific data, or should we be creating sort of meetings, gatherings where we bring in all these stakeholders to discuss what's the visioning like? What are some of the practical ways we can move towards that? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, well, so one way right off the bat is if you're doing research on how it can be a better sort of community anchor, look at where the university purchases its goods from, and then see what local businesses provide those goods, because universities spend a ton of money in acquiring stuff. And so if you're even if it's not goods, but also services, if you're identifying local institutions or even regional institutions that supply those products or those services, changing a purchasing plan to buy locally is going to recirculate a ton of money here in the local economy. And that's going to allow those dollars to flow and make it more of a place-based institution. So money talks on that end.
Great answer. I think that the other focus that I would add is many of the communities and nonprofit groups don't have the capacity for a lot of research and planning and study. And so, that collaboration with the university becomes critical in good decision making, so that we have evidence-based decision, that we are using good current data for where we invest and how we invest. So any university, we have lots of institutions in all of our communities. Making that coordinated effort is really, really critical. And then I would also add pressure on the housing market, right? So here in Ithaca, that is a great example. We have a challenge at HUD working with homeless agencies to find affordable housing in this area because you have a very tight housing market. And so how universities impact the local housing market is really critical. They tend to drive up prices and eat up units off campus that local people need. And I think that's true in not just here in Ithaca, but across the communities where we have a large footprint of a university. So how to help solve those problems and be part of the solution, I think would be great.
You could always run for public office or serve on a nonprofit board.
Great. Boards especially, start there and then build your political campaign, right? I think we are up on time. So I want to thank our very well-informed and helpful speakers, and thank all of you for the good questions and your patience. Thank you.